I knew of Bruce Springsteen. I knew certain songs. I could hear him on the radio. I knew he was from New Jersey. Kind of that. The moment that I called my John Landau, where I was hearing music for the very first time, probably like a lot of people in my generation was born in the USA. And believe it or not, it was a song that now that I've gotten into Bruce, I probably wouldn't even have it in my top 50, if not even 100. But it was Cover Me. Believe it or not, I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is Bruce Springsteen. And then I started listening to it in Darlington County and Born in the USA, obviously, Downbound Train. I was like, this is amazing music. And what appealed to me, and I probably didn't use these words then, but it's probably what I was thinking, wasn't mature enough. While you had, and if you remember that my high school years was also the big hair metal days, right? When that was going, and a lot of that music was what I would call was about sex, right? Or Bruce Springsteen's music was about the guy chasing the girl. He didn't quite get her yet. It was about, I saw my dad my dad was a blue collar guy, so I saw him get up every day and go to work and come home late with his, dirty clothes and his dirty boots. It was very relatable, and it was like he was. So many of us, it was like he was speaking to me. Like this was a direct message to me. And I remember saying, all right, I gotta get more albums. I gotta start listening to more. And interestingly, I remember, okay, let's start at the beginning. And I don't know if a lot of people had this reaction. When I put Greetings on, it was so different than Born in the USA. I was blown away that this is the same artist. And it just from that moment, I say it was a love affair that's gone on for 30 something years. Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. Joining me tonight is a fellow Texan, not, I guess, just a couple hours away from here, Mark?
About three and a half.
Yeah. Mark is joining me. I am thrilled. We met each other online. He raised his hand and said, hey, I'd love to talk to Bruce. And so welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Appreciate it.
So tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, actually, on a Bruce podcast, interestingly enough, I was born and raised in New Jersey, in Kearney, New Jersey, about an hour and 10 minutes north of Asbury Park.
Okay.
So that's where I guess the love affair with Bruce began, and then been in Texas now since 2011. And,
what brought you to Texas?
Work. I came for the company I was working with at the time, and asked for an opportunity, and I took it and really enjoyed it. So.
Oh, good. Where did you live beforehand?
Before New Jersey? Or
yeah. Like you grew up in Jersey, but where were you living before you moved to Texas?
I'm sorry, I apologize. Yeah, so I was actually born and raised in New Jersey. I was in New Jersey until 2004. Then I was in Florida. I lived in just north of Jupiter, Florida, from 04 to 11, and then Texas in 11. And both Florida and Texas were job relocations.
Okay. Do you find living in East Texas was it a culture adjustment, or what was most interesting about it?
No, funny enough, Houston is a bit. I call it a little bit of a melting pot, right? You have a lot of because of the oil and gas industry, a lot of Canadians, a lot of Europeans. I met one of my best friends who is from Long Island, New York, who, long story short, was actually Joan Jett's bassist, played with the Del Lords. I met him.
Oh, how fun.
I met him down here. So, I find it really wasn't a culture shock. I for the most part. Now, the difference between the big difference I always say is maybe certain foods are a little better down here than back home and vice versa. But other than that, I really enjoy it.
So I think the couple of things that I find interesting when I moved from Louisiana to Dallas, is I had vaguely heard of dry counties, like Ruston, Louisiana up north, northern Louisiana, there are dry counties, but in South Louisiana, where I was from, no way.
Right.
They built, the joke is they build bars without locks on the door because they never close.
That's right.
So when I moved to Dallas, it was really weird because we'd be in a grocery store and we'd be going and like, where's the beer? Yeah, we don't sell beer. Like
Yeah.
what? Like, yeah, this is dry.
Oh
And
yeah.
and there was no rhyme or reason, Mark. Like the Tom Thumb across the street would have beer and the Kroger, the
Yeah.
the same street, just on different, sides of the street. And,
Yeah.
the Kroger would be dry. And it just was very weird for me.
Absolutely. I've run into what here, which was a little bit of an adjustment, was on Sunday you can't buy before noon.
Right.
And so it'd be 11:40, and I'd have put beer up on the.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, "No, sir, not. You got 20
Yeah.
more minutes." So that's always been an interesting one too.
Now they just made the law where you can do it at 10.
Yes,
I just
that's
saw
right.
that. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, because my son grew up here. He was born in 89. So he spent his whole life living in Dallas. So he has been a Cowboy fan from birth. He was quick to tell you he was born during the Tom Landry era.
Okay.
And then like he was 3 weeks old when Jerry bought the team.
So he saw some good times. Yes.
Yes, he did. Yeah. So, but yeah, like if you don't remember, nope, you can't. I know it's 11 o'clock and you're heading to somebody's house, but nope, you cannot pick up the beer.
You were out of luck. Absolutely.
Yes.
No doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Well, Mark, I always like to start at the beginning to talk about growing up. What kind of music did your family listen to when you were a kid?
Yeah, absolutely. My dad he was a huge 50s rock fan, right? So Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Fats Domino, loved the Four Seasons as well, which I know is a little bigger. My mom was interesting enough. She was more of of course, an Elvis fan, being of that generation, but also a big country music fan. So I kind of grew up with the best of both of you. A lot of Chuck Berry, a lot of Little Richard, a lot of Fats, Johnny Cash, of course, Roy Orbison, who kind of transcends all genres. So that was really the music I grew up on. I would say, interestingly, more classic than contemporary, if that makes sense. So they really weren't listening to ABBA. They were listening to stuff that predated me in the 70s.
Sure. All right, good. Well, and did you embrace that? Did you?
Yes, very much so. I used to love my dad, when we had kind of dating ourselves at the old record players, but he put the vinyl on of Chuck Berry. Me and my sister would dance around, and we loved it. Yeah, it was great. My mom's country was a little harder to embrace, but once I kind of got it, I liked it as well, no doubt.
Good. So when you started growing up and getting into high school, did you go through a rebellious phase? Did you kind of reject, or kind of just added to the repertoire of music?
I think added to it. My mom used to say I gave her, no problem until I was 25.
Okay.
25, some personal things, but no real rebellion. I kind of enjoyed what they were listening to, and definitely added to it myself. I think by high schools, when now I could start appreciating some Jay Giles and some Eagles and Boz Scaggs, that kind of started coming across as well.
What era of high school did you graduate?
Oh, I graduated in 87.
Okay. So you're about 10 years past me, because I graduated in 77.
Okay.
So, how did you discover Bruce? And if you can you explain what about his music spoke to you?
Sure. So I had some older cousins. Okay. And they were, if putting the time frame right, it was around the River album came out. And they were listening to the River. And so 81, I was 11, 12.
Yeah.
12. And so, I liked it, and it was interesting. And I knew Bruce Springsteen. I knew this is so funny. My Little League coach would take us home from practice, and he would be playing the Bruce albums. And
Yes.
I remember talking about how Born to Run was going to become the New Jersey State song within the New Jersey. But it was, I knew of Bruce Springsteen. I knew certain songs. I could hear him on the radio. I knew he was from New Jersey. Kind of that. The moment that I called my John Landau, where I was hearing music for the very first time, probably like a lot of people in my generation, was Born in the USA. And believe it or not, it was a song that now that I've gotten into Bruce, I probably wouldn't even have it in my top 50, if not even 100. But it was Cover Me. Believe it or not, I heard Cover Me. I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is Bruce Springsteen. And then I started listening to it in Darlington County and Born in the USA, obviously, Downbound Train. I was like, this is amazing music. And what appealed to me, and I probably didn't use these words then, but it's probably what I was thinking wasn't mature enough. While you had, and if you remember that my high school years was also the big hair metal days, right? When that was going on.
Yeah.
And a lot of that music was what I would call about, was about sex, right? Or about,
yes.
Bruce Springsteen's music was about the guy chasing the girl. He didn't quite get her yet, but he was chasing her. It was about, I saw my dad my dad was a blue collar guy, so I saw him get up every day and go to work and come home late with his, dirty clothes and his dirty boots. It was very relatable. And, it was like I saw like so many of us, it was like he was speaking to me. Like this was a direct message to me. And I remember saying, all right, I gotta get more albums. I gotta start listening to more. And interestingly, I remember, okay, let's start at the beginning. And I don't know if, a lot of people had this reaction. When I put Greetings on, it was so different than Born in the USA. I was blown away that this is the same artist. And it just from that moment, I say it was a love affair that's gone on for 30 something years.
Yeah. I had a similar experience. I've talked about this before. Right out of I graduated high school, I kind of discovered, I bought the Beach Boys Endless Summer 8-track and fell in love with their harmony and that surf music and that whole car music and everything. And so I went through and was buying every Beach Boy album I could find. And the first time I bought Pet Sounds, I'm like, what? This is not a Beach Boy album. What is this? And now then, by far, if you push me, favorite album, I would go Pet Sounds. I mean, even that's sacrilegious on a Bruce Springsteen podcast. It just something about that album just still to me is just so beautiful and speaks to me. But it was totally different, right?
It's a quick Pet Sound story.
Oh, please, anytime, always.
When Rolling Stone came out with the top 500 albums of all time.
Yeah.
I know they've had different iterations. Well, the one I remember seeing, Pet Sounds, was number 2, I believe, or 3.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it was Sgt. Pepper's. I think it was Pet Sounds, and it was Highway 61 Revisited.
Yeah.
And I said, the Beach Boys. And I went and got Pet Sounds. And again, just like you, I could not believe it was the Beach Boys. It was so ahead of its time, in my opinion, revolutionary. Yes, absolutely felt the same way.
Yeah, it was. And, and I can imagine, I can picture, and I've heard a couple of people talk about it, right? Like, Born in the USA is your gateway drug, right? And I still say, too many times, snob Springsteen fans will, Born in the USA, like, hey, that's a lot of great songs. I understand that we've probably overheard I'm on Fire and Cover Me, as you talk about, right? But I picture the guy or gal like, oh, I really like this Born in the USA. I wonder what this Nebraska thing is, right?
Right. Absolutely. No doubt.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I think people in my generation, right, are, as you put it, which is great, the gateway drug was Born in the USA. And there was a time where, I don't know if feeling guilty about some right word, but like, well, I had no choice. I was a 14. That's when I came of age.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think Born in the USA, you get a little bit of that snobbiness. I'll put Downbound Train up as one of the greatest Bruce Springsteen songs.
Yeah.
Ever. I mean, it stands on the song.
Yeah.
And the whole album. I mean, if you listen again, it got a little co-opted, but Born in the USA, the song about a Vietnam veteran coming back home and how hard it is to adjust is such. I mean, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I've said this multiple times, Mark, and so if you're a regular listener, skip ahead 10 seconds. But I had Heather on the phone on the podcast a few months ago, and her whole episode was all about Leonard Cohen because that's her favorite musician. And she said what she thought was the most funny is that Leonard Cohen's most famous song, Hallelujah, and Bruce Springsteen's arguably most famous song, Born in the USA, are both their most misunderstood songs.
Right. That's very true.
And it is. And, I had a buddy of mine, and he'll say to this day, he said, I listened to Born in the USA so much that it just I've it's like a food that I've eaten so much that I'm like, I'm tired of eating this food anymore. He goes, I don't, he says, I acknowledge that it was a great album and it is a great album. It's just I've heard it so much that I'm just like, now that I need a break and listening to other things.
Right.
Yeah.
I understand that.
So as you're, discovering and going through, you already talked a little bit about Greetings, but talk about going and finding other albums and your Bruce path, your Bruce journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, if I remember correctly, I think the next two albums I got were Greetings, and I did not get, interestingly enough, which now has become my favorite. We'll get to that, I'm sure, later. Wild and Innocent. I ended up getting Darkness. So I had Born in USA, Greetings, and Darkness, and I think with Greetings, it was the words, it was the rhyming, it was like just that whole thing just was incredible. Whereas Darkness, it was like I call it was like a punch to the stomach, right? It was like the in Promised Land, right, when he talks about I ain't a boy, I'm a man.
Yeah,
I was probably 15, going on 16 when I was going through it, and it was just so. It just spoke to you, and again, it was about, and I'll probably say this numerous times here. It was like someone was speaking to you. Like he wrote it for me, and so that was an amazing revelation. So I think at that point, by not long after I'd had at that point, it was not a big catalog, but I had the whole catalog. I thought it was interesting. I remember people telling me, "You're not going to like Nebraska." It's like, oh, okay, interesting. And I loved Nebraska. I thought Nebraska was so, I mean, not just Atlantic City, but all this, Nebraska itself. They were just fantastic. It was just fantastic music. And then if you follow the timeline, as I'm getting into all this, is when Live 75 to 85 comes out, and then it was just okay. Now I've got some live catalog here and the studio stuff, and it was full bore. And then not long after that was Tunnel of Love came out, and off we're running, so to speak.
So Mark, always like to preface, you mentioned kind of you've gotten live tracks now. I always like to preface the amount of times you've seen Bruce as it's not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are. There are people that have never seen him. There are people that have seen him hundreds of times. So, how about you? Where are you in the thing?
I'm in the 30s.
Okay.
I'm in the 30s. So when I lived in New Jersey, it was great. Like the Rising Tour, for example.
Yeah.
He played, I think it was 10 nights at Giant Stadium. I went to 6 or 7, whatever it was. So I've had the advantage of being in New Jersey, where he's done a lot of long stands, and was able to do that. And then I also was fortunate. I had a job where I traveled a lot, and I would schedule trips around where Bruce was going to be. So I actually saw him in St. Paul and then Houston before I lived here by myself. I actually literally went to the concert by myself, which is a unique experience. I kind of recommend it for a fan out there if you haven't done it. It can be really enjoyable, and you kind of can take it all in. So I'm in the 30s.
I drove to Nashville and saw him there, and then my favorite story, speaking of Pet Sounds, is I worked for a company that had a small office in Winnipeg, Canada, And I went to Winnipeg about once a year because the 5 or 6 agents that work there all reported to me. And so I went to my boss and I said, hey, I haven't been to Canada in about a year. Do you care if I go? And he says, no, I don't care. I said, okay, but I got to give you the truth is Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys is playing in Winnipeg, and that's why I'm picking these days.
Right.
Okay, I appreciate your candor, but I don't care. So, and that was, and so I did, I flew in and specifically was, timed my trip so I could go see, Brian in Winnipeg. And so that's neat. Yeah. So any stories you want to share about tours or concerts or memorable events?
Sure.
Were you in Woodlands in 2016?
I was in the Woodlands in 2016.
That was a good show.
That was one of the best shows. And I'm not just saying it was one of the best shows. I mean, from a set list perspective, you couldn't get much better. Now, what I ended up reading at the time on Backstreets was there was a little bit of an audible where he was supposed to start with a different song and ended up changing, starting with Seeds, which I thought was fantastic.
Yes. So I had been at, I can't remember now if it was Magic or Working on the Dream, but one of them, he was in Houston. And so I think it was Working on a Dream, and he opened with Seeds. So I'd seen that. And so This Is Your Sword is one of my songs I was chasing. And he was going to open with This Is Your Sword.
Yes.
And then Tom Morello looks over and goes, hey, we're in Houston. Oh yeah, we should cut this song that Jesse specifically wants to hear, and let's play Seeds. So yeah, but and I always think of my buddy Sam, who, as I talked about, says that he's heard Born in the USA, the album, too much. He said, but there's no doubting when those two brothers got up to do No Surrender. You're like, that's the definition of joy.
That was amazing.
Yeah,
that was amazing. Yeah, that was one of the best moments I've seen at a Bruce show. No question.
Yeah, and they were nice enough. They actually were on the podcast.
Oh,
and
wow!
So I was able to get both of them on, and then about 2 years ago, I guess, because it was before the pandemic, we went to Austin in June to go see John Hyatt. John Hyatt was going to be at the Paramount Theater in Austin, an acoustic show. And the two brothers, the Flores brothers, said, oh, we're going too. Can we meet beforehand? And so we got to see him. We got to meet them in person and got to talk a little bit.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So I agree. In fact, a lot of people who have been on the show have not seen that, and I've said Google it. And I said also the audible of One Step Up with the sign request, and the band figuring out, okay, we're going to figure this out as we go.
Amazing.
It just really made for a pretty special show.
Yes, no doubt. No doubt.
So tell me other stories maybe from tours.
Sure. So the first time I was going to go see Bruce was the Born in the USA tour, stadium leg, Giant Stadium.
Okay.
And I get tickets, and it happens to be the same night my cousin Ricky's wedding. And I remember saying to my mother, well, I'm going to have to miss the wedding. I'm not going to miss Bruce Springsteen. Of course, that was shot down. So I said, okay. Long story short, get tickets for the next to last night, and it's rained out. And it's moved to September 1st, which is going to be the last night of the Giant Stadium leg, which happens to be my dad's birthday. My dad, being super cool, was like, don't go see Bruce Springsteen. So we ended up, me and my buddies took a cab to go see Bruce Springsteen, Giant Stadium. And it was, when we get there, there's a sign and it says, the boss with an arrow. And I remember the guy said, the kid said, well, my boss sees what time I get back with this cab, with this traffic, I'm going to be in trouble. So I just never forgot that. Interestingly about that show, because of the postponement, he did Growing Up, which he had not done a lot on the stadium leg of Born in the USA. Did Growing Up, and he closed with Santa Claus Is Coming to Town on September 1st, which was fantastic. That was that was an amazing. Like everybody says, when you see him live the first time, there's
Yeah.
nothing quite like it. So that was great. Then I saw him Tunnel of Love tour either the second or third night of the actual tour in the old Spectrum in Philadelphia. We went down. We actually scalped tickets. This was obviously before StubHub and those sort of things. And that was the first time I ever heard Rosalie a lot, and that was just an amazing moment. Two other quick ones, if you don't mind, I'll tell them.
Oh no, please.
I got to see him on the Tom Joad tour in Connecticut.
Oh,
and that was incredible. With this little theater in Connecticut, Bruce came out, made a joke about how no singing along, no clapping. It's if you do that, the state police are going to call you out, come and get you. And then towards the end, he played a lot of the Tom Joad stuff. But to hear, it was the first time I heard Promised Land. I think he played Darkness Factory acoustic was just amazing. That was really, really great. And then two songs that I had been chasing, and when I tell you, they're two pretty popular ones too. But first one was Kitty's Back, right?
Okay.
I had not heard Kitty's Back. Went to go see him. It was the Rising tour, the stadium leg. And person I went with said, "Do you think he's going to play Kitty's Back?" I'm like, "No, he's not going to play Kitty's Back." And sure enough, in the encore, you can't mistake that riff. And he's playing Kitty's Back. Well, that was great. And then, long story short, I must have a thing with Bruce getting postponed, but I had tickets to go see him when Danny passed.
Okay.
And so they postponed the tour. So they came back, and he talked about Danny. And they opened up. I remember they opened up with Blood Brothers, and he went into "I Want to Be With You," which was incredible rendition.
Sure.
But again, I spent maybe too much time on Backstreets.com. They basically said what appeared to be an audible. The band was walking off the stage, and he came back and closed with Kitty's Back. So that was amazing.
That's nice.
Yeah, that was amazing. And then the other one was I got to see him in Sunrise, Florida again. And if you remember, I think it was a fall of 2009. That's September, October, November, where he was doing the full album side.
Right.
And so I didn't have a ticket to that show, but I guess in preparation, you were playing a lot of stuff. And so I got to hear Jungle Land with Clarence live. And I was like, okay,
nice.
that was definitely one off the list. So those are just a couple, of the moments that really stand out.
Yeah. I was in Louisville for the River Tour, the second River Tour. And it's the first time I'd ever seen this where, they had done Shout. He had already done the, you just saw the, earth shattering. And I swear everyone was walking off stage. Right. And I saw, because I had seats from the corner. So I was seeing them, and I saw Max hand his drumsticks to someone, and all of a sudden Bruce picks up a guitar. And you could see, to me at least, it looked like what do you mean, And they just did a quick Bobby Jean.
Oh, what a nice song!
Yeah, and it felt. I've said this before. It felt like that when you discover a missing Christmas present under the tree, like, oh my God, how did we miss this?
Yes,
So those are kind of special moments.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's good. So yeah, let's move into favorite albums and songs. And you've already talked about. By the way, my first 7 shows, he did not do Thunder Road.
Oh my gosh!
I was
really?
like, how did I not hear Thunder Road? I've not heard Thunder Road live. Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
There's some. I always say this to people. To talk about the Born in the USA being overplayed. I once made a comment: if I never heard Hungry Heart live again, I'd be okay. Because I heard it so many times.
Well,
live and stuff.
That's my, once again, and Sam has now been talked about more than he never is. But, Sam always like, I don't need to hear Born to Run live again. Give me another song. Take that one out and put it. And I go, yeah, but Sam, everyone's show is someone's first show. And if you go to see Bruce Springsteen for your first time and you don't get Born to Run, you're going to be disappointed,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so, absolutely, right. There are, and there are like, we were driving to Houston for that show I was talking about, and it wasn't the Woodland show. It was at, like one of the downtown,
Probably Toyota
yeah,
Center. Right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And Sam was complaining that, I swear Badlands is on every 4 songs on East Street Radio. I swear they have just got it on rotation. Like, we are hearing Badlands so many times. And part of it was like, we had listened to a live show, the 3.5 hours from Dallas, right? And so we were there in the Toyota Center, and the lights go down, and they open up and they start Badlands, and Sam looks at me like, really? Really? Really?
Oh, yes.
And
I can understand that.
And it is, truly first world problems, right? That just,
Totally.
but
Totally,
it is, yes. It's kind of, that's good. That's hilarious. All right. So let's talk about album songs that mean a lot to you.
Oh gosh. So this is, I only have one. I only have one child, so but I always think when people say pick your favorite child sort of thing, I always come back to Night as my favorite Bruce. I don't know why. It's just something. I love that song. I've gotten to hear it several times live, which is fantastic. For whatever reason, what I've been listening to now a lot live, and this is one of the benefits of YouTube, is I've been listening to all the songs from Wild and Innocent from live shows. And there's the show, I guess it was September of 2009, where we did the album at the Garden. And there is an amazing rendition of Incident and then Kitty's Back that are just mind-blowing. And I don't know why, but I've been spending a lot of time recently on Wild the Innocent. A couple of, talking earlier about the snobby thing or the not. I find that the Tunnel of Love and what I call the albums released on the same day, Lucky Town and Human Touch, are very underrated albums. I think those are ones that the aficionados sometimes look down on. Maybe not. I shouldn't say, but I know some people. I think Roll the Dice is a great song. I think Living Proof brings tears to my eyes every time I hear it. So there's so many that that you just love. Devils and Dust. I love them all. But the Night. So if we go album wise, Born to Run, Darkness, Wild Innocent, and Greetings just probably are. I've probably changed tomorrow, but those are probably the tops in my mind.
And is it just Greetings, the poetry, and how it's just something very different?
Yes, I describe it to some. I have friends that have probably kids around your age, sons around your son's age, and some of them are just not. A lot of them are into new music,
right?
And I described Greetings as almost kind of a very early rap album, if you will. It's a lot of just words and rhyming, and maybe some of the songs don't make sense. Maybe just to think about it, but it's incredible, and it is that it's the words. It's like does this bus stop at 82nd Street? It really, if you really sit there and listen to it, it makes no sense, right? If we're a story record. But it's amazing. You just love it. So I think the poetry and the rhyming, absolutely, Jesse, absolutely.
I love that. Tunnel of Love probably would be on my list of underrated albums, and totally I really, and I had a guy several years ago said you either have to have your heart broken a few times, or you've got to had a few years of, you've got to been married for a while to understand Tunnel of Love, right? Yes. Like, it is not a young man's album. I I like that. And um, the for my Father's Day gift this past June, my son and wife watched Springsteen on Broadway with me.
Ah,
My son had never seen it, and Linda had tried to see it and was got it. It's really funny. It's almost like a comedy because we're watching and she's like, okay, I'm depressed. I cannot watch this crap anymore. I'm gone to bed. And like 2 minutes later, Bruce goes, all right, I'm going to get you off suicide watch. We're now going to talk about,
yes, yes.
and so when she watched the second time, she really smiled at that. But, Linda's like, I don't understand growing up. What is this? I mean, did he do all this? And I'm like, well, in his mind, he did all this,
Mhm.
in his imagination. And some of these are, in my mind, these are, like similes, like allusions to what he did. And maybe climbing on top of the school might be, a pirate's
Mhm.
mast or whatever you want to talk about. And once she heard that, she went, oh, okay, well, I like this. I like this
It
a
makes
lot.
sense. Right,
Yeah.
right.
And Chris immediately just really loved it. He just was like, I love that song. So
That's great.
yeah. What got them both was, and Chris especially, he had never heard the story of the Wish. And
Oh,
when he heard that, Linda, who, has lost both her parents, my mom is still alive, you know, she was really impressed with that. And Chris just was like, I love that song. That is such a
yes,
beautiful song.
it
So
really
yeah,
is.
yeah. So thoughts on Letter to You and Western Stars?
Okay, so I'll say Western Stars. I had gone through some loss in my life relationship wise, and
Yeah.
I lost my mom in June of 20 to COVID actually in
Oh
New
no.
Jersey, and for whatever reason, Tucson Train literally to me is like if I were going to write how I felt in life,
Yeah.
if I had the ability to write like that, and it's almost as if it's speaking to me. So I love Western Stars. It was I have a lot of friends down here in Houston who are real country folks,
Yeah.
and I put a couple of tracks on from like this is amazing. And my one friend was really impressed because on the highway on Sirius Highway 56 they were saying they were
Yeah.
playing some of the tracks from it. He was like, "Hey, I just heard Bruce Springsteen on the highway." He's like, "There,"
Yeah.
and he told me, which was great, was I guess the I'll still call him a disc jockey, the
Yeah.
personality on the highway made a comment. It's like, finally, I get to play Bruce Springsteen on the highway. So that was great. And I think Letter to You, I again, it's I think as I'm getting older, and I always tell the story. So when I saw Bruce Springsteen, he made a comment about how I'm 35 and I can't be doing all this jumping around anymore, right? And now he's about to be 72 and I'm 52, and I'm like, wow. But it's like as his writings mature and as we're maturing, right? And so
Yes.
your Tunnel of Love analogy was great. Like when Tunnel of Love came out, I was 20. Didn't
Yeah.
mean as much to me as after I got divorced.
Yes.
Then it meant a lot more, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. No doubt.
Yeah. And I think that I've told this story multiple times on the podcast. But I had a lady who is a host of a bereavement podcast. It's all about dealing with grief. And I kind of in the middle of our discussion, I said, have you ever listened? Have you listened to Bruce's latest album, Letter to You? And she goes, no, no. And I said, well, I think you should. I think you'd find it interesting. And she, like 3 days later, emailed me and said, oh my gosh, this album is all about grief. Can I come back on the podcast and now talk to you about it? Because, she says it fits perfectly with what my show is about, my podcast about.
Absolutely.
And I'm like you. I imagine the Tucson train story. I mean, I totally figure out that, the narrator has messed up bad. I don't know if it's, gambling, drugs, infidelity, irresponsibility. I have no idea, but he has messed up bad. And he has moved to this new city, and he has gotten his 12-step program for whatever he has. And he has, he has gotten this job that is physical labor, and he has learned that. And all of a sudden, I just picture him calling his partner and saying, just the weekend, just the weekend. I will put you up in a hotel. You will have but just give me a weekend to show you, how a man can change, right? Just
yeah. No, as the line in it, that it was like the whole song, but the one that hit me is when he says, "If at night, if I could just turn off my brain," and how many times I've lied in bed and you replay the mistakes you made. And you can't get over it, but you have to. That line and that whole song. I think you were 100. I see it the same way, and a lot of that I can apply to myself. Actually.
Yeah, and I and I do think I was never someone who had insomnia. Just never. I was just lucky. I was one of those people, unless my wife and I were having a fight, but just normally, I'm tired, I go to bed. And Linda, my wife, always fought insomnia. And I, being the total jerk, would go, well, just lay there in the dark, close your eyes, just rest. And then when I had surgery 2 or 3 months ago, I don't know why, but all of a sudden I couldn't go to sleep. I couldn't turn my brain off. And I begged her forgiveness. I'm like, okay, now that I understand this, it's like people who've never had migraines or back problems, like, oh, come on, take an Advil. But then you're like, oh, you have your first migraine. You go, okay, I'm a jerk. So yeah, I think that it is so hard to turn that brain off. Like, how do you do that? So yeah, I love Little Steven's version of it.
Yes, yes.
And so there is no way to know this, Mark, but I've asked a couple people this question. Let's say we get a tour in 2022, knock on wood, all of us are hoping. Is it a greatest hits kind of tour, or will he do a lot of Letter to You as if it had not been a year and a half since he released the album?
It's interesting because I heard an interview with Bruce probably around the Tunnel of Love time frame.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, he had a comment in there. He's like, I'm not knocking anyone, but I never want to be a Las Vegas greatest hits act. Right. I always want some new material. And I think that's why with the reunion tour, even though there was not necessarily an album, I guess maybe greatest hits, he played a lot of the stuff that ultimately came out on tracks, a lot of unreleased stuff. My gun to my head, I think it's going to be a lot of Letter to You, and as if the time didn't pass. That's my own personal.
Yeah, unless he surprises us and puts out another album next year, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And in fact, I'm going to ask you in a few minutes, what songs are you still chasing? And I put the caveat, exclude Western Star's Letter to You, right? Because we're all chasing it. Yes, we all want those. Like, I really was convinced that Burning Train would be the perfect song to start the tour with. And then when he did Ghost on Saturday Night Live, I went, okay, maybe Ghost would be a good song if it do that. So that's great. Yeah, the people that own our network, that own my podcast network, are not big Springsteen fans, but they wanted to. They always like, hey, Jesse, if you need us to be on an episode, we'd love to join you. And I said, well, how about you guys have you seen Western Stars? Like, no, what is that? I'm like, well, basically Bruce did an album and he knew he couldn't tour with it, so he got together, not the E Street Band, but a different band, and basically played the album live and at his farm in Jersey, and they filmed it. I said, and then there's things between. I said, so why don't you, as a non-Bruce Springsteen fan, why don't you watch the film and then you come on and talk about it? And so Sunday night, I got a text from Martha, and like, oh my God, thank you for showing us this. So
That's fantastic. That's great.
in the next week or so, they're going to join me and just talk about that as, you
Oh,
know,
awesome.
yeah, I think that's going to be a fun, from a because, as my wife always says, you're going to love anything he does, Jesse. And I'm like, well, yes.
Right. True. True.
I didn't love Seeger Sessions, but overall, you're right. I mean,
Right.
yes, it is. So how about it, Mark? Are there songs you're chasing?
Oh, definitely. So
Okay.
I have to go again as of today.
Yeah.
Incident would probably be number one.
Wow.
Incident
Okay.
would probably be number one. E Street Shuffle, Meeting Across the River.
Yeah.
I've not heard. Those are probably the ones where, I think if I had named those, again, not counting Western Stars or Letter to You, those would be the three that I've not heard.
And those are actually three, like a lot of times, I'll say like, no way I'm getting Lion's Den from Tracks, but I would go crazy,
Right.
Doing that. So those are three that you have a chance getting.
And I'm really like, okay, to your point there, I would love to hear Stolen Car Tracks rendition.
Yeah.
Right. I know I'm probably not going to get that. Right. So yeah, I'd love to hear Racing in the Streets 78, which I love that 78 version.
Yeah.
Probably not going to get it. So I tried to make it where, I'm trying to do the percentages. Like you said, Lion's Den would be a fantastic.
Yeah.
Probably not going to get it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's good. So what do you think he's got in store for us next? What do you think as a fan, or maybe is there something you're hoping for?
Oh gosh, I'd like to see. Okay, what I think we have in store next, I think, is he's going to go on tour with the whole band, right, with the E Street Band plus the background singers and the horn section. I think we'll get something similar to what we saw in the Woodlands in 60.
So you'll think we'll get that the E Street Orchestra?
Yes. Okay, yes, I do. What I would love to see, now this is something different. I would like to see him tour, and maybe it's a select. Two things. I would love to have seen him take Broadway on the road and do theaters all over the country. I thought we were going to get that, and probably because of COVID we're not. But I thought even if he just went to the 10 cities in the U.S., maybe I thought that would be amazing. I've always said I'd like to see I'll call it a slim down E Street Band, right? Just the E Street Band. You want to have Patty, I understand that. I understand you don't want to, keep Nils and Little Steven, but just the E Street Band. And I would love to just see maybe him play. The album side thing to me is just such a great concept. Do a tour of that where each night's going to be a different album side plus some other. Yeah. That's a kind of a dream.
Yeah, I know. Like I would, when at the end of the working on the dream, they did some of that, and I would love to see him do Magic.
Yes.
And just that and Tunnel of Love, as you're talking about, it would be fun. It is always interesting. All right, Mark, what haven't I asked you that I should have?
Oh gosh. From Bruce Springsteen's perspective, I think I guess interesting. You didn't ask who's my favorite member of the E Street Band. Maybe that
okay.
That would be, and the answer may surprise you.
Okay.
I think the other thing was you might ask if they were all volunteer how literally and the death of Danny and Clarence but how it hit. Like I remember my mother crying when Elvis died, and I couldn't understand it. It was like, what? And then I kind of understood when Danny went first that it was a piece of your youth was gone, and something that was so, even though Bruce is the focal point, the center, the E Street Band was such, it still is such a factor, an important aspect of my life. And to have a component of it taken away forever was, I remember I called E Street Radio and actually talked to Dave Marsh when it happened. And I said, it feels like, I feel like my childhood ended. Like I finally have grown up, and he like that. And then Clarence that was hard to wrap my head around. That really was difficult, and I was kind of concerned that how is Bruce going to handle this? Is he still going to tour? And I think getting Jake in there was awesome. I thought that was just a great way to do it.
Yeah, and I think it helped that during the Wrecking Ball tour, they had a horn section, so there wasn't that, like on the River tour, they had, Jake by himself, but during Wrecking Ball and High Hopes, right, they had that whole horn section. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't that pressure, even though Jake slowly came and did that. Push comes to shove, I'd love to have Susie on the show. I mean, I know little Steven would tell great stories. Yes. I'll take anyone. But
do you follow him on? Do you follow Stevie on Twitter?
And I do, and I love him.
He is one of the, because he answers. First of all, he gets in debates. Answers.
Yes.
Somebody put up there it was a couple months ago. Like, didn't you have a Cadillac convertible with jersey plates that said Miami on them? And he posted a picture of it 10 seconds.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Yes.
Great.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to his book.
Yes,
I think it's going to be great. And I know I reached out to his publicist. Now, None But the Brave has posted they've got a 2-part interview with him, but I went to his website, and I've been lucky enough to have Maureen on twice. And
did you really?
yes,
awesome.
Yes, it was nice. But I felt weird. Like I DM'd her and I said, hey, do you know who's doing, Steven's promotion for the book? And she said, yes, go to this website. I'm like, okay. And I wanted to go, can you just say, hey, I had a good time talking to Jesse. This guy's cool. Yeah. And I appreciate you telling me about that, but do you remember, how did you feel during the dark years? Like when Bruce has fired the band, moved to California. Talk about that, Mark.
So I saw Bruce with the new band. I think he played 10 nights at the old Meadowlands Arena. I think I saw 3 or 4 of those shows. I actually saw the show where he did it was a fundraiser, and he brought Max out to play a number. Stevie and Southside came out and played. Then Clarence came out and played 10th Avenue and Corner. But anyway, I enjoyed those shows, and I enjoyed that part of it, because to me, it's great to see the together as the band's one thing, but I was still seeing Bruce Springsteen. He was still playing a lot of the songs that I love. The moving to California didn't bother me. I know a lot of people go, oh, he sold out, or he's Hollywood. That really never, it didn't bother me. What bothered me, I think, was where after that tour with the other band, there was that period, like 3 or 4 years before the reunion tour, where there was nothing, no new material. And then Greatest Hits came out. I was like, all right, there's 3 or 4 new Bruce songs on it. But it was to me not as bad. I think some maybe longer following E Street Band fans might have taken it worse. I wasn't devastated by it. I was kind of accepting, if that makes sense.
Did you go to any of the reunion shows?
Yes.
Okay. So I had a guy on the podcast, and I love telling this story because it's so funny. He said he was sitting in the pit at a reunion show, and he, in his mind, goes, this is it. This is the peak of my Springsteen fandom. They've broken up. They've gotten back together. We have had the band. And who knows, every few years, maybe they'll get together and tour again. But, it's been a great ride. He said, and I think back and I want to go to that guy. You've got the rising coming. You've got the magic. You've got
Yes.
an autobiography. You have Broadway. You have a 2.5-year tour of the river. Like
Yes.
you have Letter to You coming. Like
Yes.
they've only reached halfway of what they're going to do.
It's very true. I mean, I thought
Yeah.
the same. I remember the reunions were thinking, well, this is probably going to be it. This is his swan song. He's going to go on and do some different things now. And wow, what a way to go out, right? And you're right. And I didn't even mention the rising. Obviously, 20 years of 9/11. But when you listen to that album, and you think that every single song, like you're missing, right?
Yeah.
That fits someone who went to work or on 9/11, a New York City fireman, or a worker in Cantor Fitzgerald in the World Trade Center, or it fits a guy in Ohio whose wife left him.
Yeah.
It's amazing how you can take every one of those songs and apply it specifically to 9/11 or something completely different.
Yeah. There is no great significance to it, Mark. It's just based on my very first show was the 2002 Rising show here in Dallas. So every time I've seen him, and I'm at 17 or 18, he's played the Rising.
Yes.
And that's the only song that he's played every time.
You've heard it every time. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so
great song.
Yeah, it is a great song. And I don't ever get tired of hearing it. It is, and I told my wife and son, we went out to eat and we came back. I said, oh, by the way, Bruce did a song at the memorial for 9/11. I said, oh, let's go. And I said, his voice sounded a little strained, I said, but it was early in the morning and I think he was filled with emotion. And both of them, were impressed, like how emotional he was and how good it sounded. It is. I read some article just recently on this 20th anniversary, like somehow Bruce has become the patron saint of 9/11 or something, and I do think he gave a voice to that.
Yes,
that
no
is
doubt.
that kind of is goes back to the hey Bruce, we need you. And
I was just about to bring that up. Yes,
yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
And apparently one of the things I heard too is he was reading New York Times, the obituaries.
Yeah.
And how many people would put, and they talk about how they loved Bruce Springsteen, or a Bruce Springsteen song was played, and the Bruce, we need you. And that's, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally
It's
agree.
just, and it is, I just think it is a really wonderful legacy. And it always means a lot to me because I was a casual fan. But when I saw that telethon, when it opened, and they're doing, My City of Ruins, and you're just like, oh my goodness. And now then,
a gut punch. Yeah.
It is absolutely. Yeah. Well, very nice. All right. If you are a friend of Mark's and you're listening to this, I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. I hope you go back and check other episodes. But it's time for the Mary question. And if you're a friend of Mark's, you have no idea who the Mary question is. But he had homework. The Jay Armstrong is an honors English teacher and recently retired from the Philadelphia area. And every year he would have his seniors in his honors English class spend 2 days breaking apart Thunder Road by Bruce Springsteen. Look at all the lyrics. They talk about the imagery. They talk about the themes of the song. And at the end of the 2 days, he looks at the class and says, "This Mary, get in the car." So, Mark, that's your question.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe she gets in the car. Now, I have a little different take. I believe they get in the car, and in my head too now, that Thunder Road, they're 19-year-old kids. Okay, I have them being a little maybe younger than, because when Born to Run came out, Bruce was 25, 26. But I have them a little younger. And I think they got in the car and they went for a ride, and he decided, all right, I have to take you home and I have to be home and go to school tomorrow, sort of thing. Yeah. But I do think if they get in the car, he gets in the car. Absolutely. Now, is that the consensus answer you get?
60% say yes.
Okay.
40% say no.
Okay.
Some of the most interesting answers is absolutely, because on Racing in the Street, she talks about being on her daddy's porch, which is the same porch that she dances across.
Ah, okay. I like that.
Many people talk about yes, because Mary, she got married and the river, so they say it's the same.
Right. Mary's Place on the Rising, right?
Yeah, okay. One of my favorites is they said absolutely. They get in the car, they drive all the way to California, they build a life, and Moonlight Motel is him mourning the death of Mary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was like, okay, that gives you a whole new perspective on Moonlight
very
Motel.
much so.
Yes.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I'll listen to that now when we're done.
Yeah. And then one of the other is one of my favorites is a guy said, it depends. He said, when the E Street Band does it, she absolutely gets in the car because the end of the song is this triumphant charge. And when he does it solo, she doesn't, because he's really, he kind of ends very kind of low key, and he's driving off by himself.
I like that. Yes, yeah. I like that.
Yeah, I love that too. Mark, this is a blast. We I say this to a lot of people, but in your case, we have a better than 50% chance of actually seeing each other in a show.
Yes,
because we're this close enough, right?
No doubt, absolutely.
I know. I always had the wish, and I guess Texas just isn't strong enough, but I always wanted him to do, Austin, Houston, Dallas, so I could do all three. But he ends up only doing one of the three. But we now go, if it's in Houston and he's not in Dallas, we just make a road trip to Houston. And I assume you do the same. Like if he's in Dallas, yes.
Now we've got our contact info.
Yeah, now we're going to do that. Yeah, now we can meet up for drinks and everything. If someone wants to reach you, are you on social media at all?
I am on Twitter at EMDelesio22.
Say again?
I'll spell it at EMDelesio, DALESSIO 22.
Okay. All right. 22, Emmett Smith?
Yes. Yeah, well, it was my college hockey number, actually.
Oh, okay.
yes.
So I guess I should ask that. Did you remain Giants fan, or did you move to Texans?
Unfortunately,
Jets?
I'm still a Giants fan. Unfortunately, I had some good years. It's been a bit down here. So I like all the New York teams. I'm a Giants, Yankees, which is tough in Houston because of the Astros.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
I'm a hockey Ranger fan, but
yeah.
But I will say this: I rooted for the Dallas Stars last year, especially in the finals. I was definitely pulling for them.
Yeah, we were too. We were really excited. They kind of caught lightning in a bottle, and so it's really funny because so many Bruce fans, love the NFC East teams, right? Whether it's whether it's the Eagles or the Washington Football Club or the Giants, right. And so, and I cannot tell you how many people have I can't believe I'm friends with a Cowboy fan. Well, I know.
Awesome.
Bruce gives us bridges, so that's great.
That's it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jesse, this was much more fun than I even thought it was going to be. I enjoyed it so much.
And I will pull back the curtain a lot. Did you quit being nervous?
Yes, I did. Absolutely.
Good.
I gotta say, once we started talking, Bruce, didn't even realize we've been recording. It is just the beauty of it. So that's great. Absolutely, no doubt.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mark, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we will get together somehow or other, and we'll break bread together. Especially as things open up.
Absolutely.
I've gone to, my mom still lives in Lake Charles, so we
Okay.
routinely go through. But I've definitely gone to Houston for shows in the past, and
Any,
so same
anytime
thing.
you're in town, just let me know and I'll do the
I
same.
will. Sounds good, my
Absolutely.
friend. All right,
Uh,
listeners, you please stay safe. Go get vaccinated. Ignore our governor in Texas. We could do a whole nother episode of political stuff, right, Mark?
no,
That
absolutely.
that we just
Absolutely.
like, oh, I can't believe Texas. I just can't believe. But yes, go get vaccinated, remain vigilant, wear your mask, wash your hands. Let's all be safe so we can get through this, because, we need to get people back on the road and we need to hear
Absolutely.
live music. So thank you, Mark. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you,
And
Jesse.
we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. We have a website, www.setlistingbruce.com. From there, you can find links to other Springsteen podcasts as well as other music-themed podcasts. We have a page devoted to our own SLB All-Star Band. These are guests who have been on the podcast more than 3 times. There is a link to our store where you can purchase Set Listing Bruce shirts as well as a Merry Question t-shirt. There is a link to our Patreon page where you can sign up to help support the podcast financially. We have different levels and different rewards based on your support. If you don't have any extra cash, and right now, who does? You can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference. You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.